when you had your faux pas, obviously you were new. Was there fallout from that, or was it just like don't do that next time?
It was just a stern talking to from my boss, and then like it just didn't
Like
happen
there were
again.
no like repercussions though. A big NBC wasn't like you messed this up for
No,
whatever.
no, it's never an issue from the big NBC. It's more of an issue from your bosses at the station because the backlash is people at home will be upset or say that your broadcast is messing up or
Yeah, heaven
it
forbid
just
you miss 7 seconds of Lester Holt.
it just doesn't look clean.
Right, right.
So like that's the biggest fallout from that.
Hmm.
And if it
Well,
if it were to happen on a consistent basis, then big NBC might be like, hey, we have a problem.
yeah.
Hmm.
So, well, I'm glad you didn't get in too much trouble. It
It's a good
didn't
learning
tank your
experience.
career.
No, but like to give you an idea, it's like that kind of thing is like it's down to the second, and
Hmm.
it's very like just being aware of timing and things like that. So
Yeah, it
yeah,
definitely gives you a different perspective how precise you have to be, and then the anchors as well. Because if you're like 30 seconds ahead or behind, do you tell the anchors to like, hey, delay this or like draw
yeah,
this part out longer?
yeah. You communicate with them, and after a while, you get an idea of how long the anchors talk, or sometimes they'll just like cross talk and improvise. And
Hmm.
so there were some shows where I would like to stay 30 seconds light consistently throughout because I know at some point they're going to improvise or the weatherman is going to go longer than usual
Hmm.
to kind of just give me that extra time. There's other ones where I want to be a little bit heavy because sometimes they don't talk as much or sometimes they end sooner than they should or just having because it's easier to kill stuff. All I gotta do is click a thing and it says it'll float it. So it takes it out of the script, it takes it out of the video queue and everything,
Hmm.
um, and then that adjusts the timing. Whereas if something happens and suddenly we're 2 minutes light in the middle of a show, that's a lot harder to make up on the fly. I
Yeah,
can't just tell my weatherman, hey, do 2 extra minutes of weather because he didn't prepare for that. He would just be repeating himself again or something like that.
yeah.
Or I could tell Master Control, hey, play some station promotions or commercials to make up for this time. Like that's kind of an emergency situation, but those are like the options um, in that case.
So when you guys are in there and you're like a minute ahead or behind, like when I'm watching or when I was watching TV, I think I can probably count on one hand the amount of times where I was like, that didn't seem right. Somebody messed up in the studio. Like, if you guys mess up in the studio, are there do you guys just have you guys have done it enough to like kind of make it seem like it wasn't a mess up, or do you guys just not mess up?
No, no, there's definitely mess ups, but it's not too often where it's noticeable to the average person.
Mm-hmm.
It's normally a situation where we adjust it behind the scenes and it's clean on air, but we know behind the scenes. So now, like before I had that job, I would watch the local news and never find anything wrong with it. But now, knowing what I know, I could watch the local news and be like, oh, they they didn't put in the right graphic, or oh, this happened because they were too heavy, or I
Yeah.
can notice these things because I was behind the scenes. But if you're just at home, most of the time you're not going to notice the little small mistakes that are made to where the people behind the scenes are like, oh, it shouldn't have been that way. But people at home are like, whatever. Yeah.
So I want to jump to. I was thinking about this earlier after we talked on Thursday, Friday, whatever day it was. Because I was listening to a Rogan podcast and they brought up the remember the Covington kids, that kid that was like wearing the MAGA hat and he was smiling, and then the Native American, and then CNN ran a story that he was harassing the Native American,
Yeah.
and then he sued and won a bunch of money because that was a lie. Um, how from your perspective, how does something like that happen? Like how does like if because when we were talking before, because I asked you a kind of similar question, and I wasn't trying to trap you with the answer then. I really just wanted to know how you were talking to me was like, yeah, we make sure we do the research and we make sure like, yeah, we might have a slight bias here or there, but we don't like we try and make sure we have all the facts right. And so how does how does something like that happen? And we don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
But it's like one of the biggest news sources in the world probably, and it just wasn't at all accurate.
Yeah. So when we're deciding on like what to cover and how to cover it, the the only thing, your primary thing is the facts, obviously. And when you get into gray waters or touchy situations, that's when your journalistic integrity is tested, and that's when you take classes on it. That's what you're taught about is journalistic integrity. That if you were to step completely outside of any affiliations you have, how do you feel about this subject? So as a local news station, there's little reason for us to talk about I, until it became as big as it was, like a Jacob Blake shooting,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, or what you were talking about, the Covington kids. There's a little reason for us to talk about that until it becomes national conversation, until it starts to be talked about by people in our town.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a local news station, like again, right after people watch our news, they're going to watch the national news. So there's no point in us talking about the same thing they're going to talk about. Though our mission and our goal is to inform people of what is going on in our town. And then when it does get to a point that we should talk about this thing, we are taking that information directly from NBC,
Mm-hmm.
because that's our parent, not our parent company, because that's Gray Television, but that's the trickle down.
That's right.
Um, or CNN is also a partner of ours, so we'll gather information from CNN, and the Associated Press. I would say in order of like hierarchy, or like how often we source those places, it would be NBC, AP, and way down is more CNN. We pull from CNN more if there's like a nice story that we want to like when I was doing the Sunrise show, I had 2.5 hours of news to fill. So sometimes I would have to find like a fluffy package about something, and I could get it from NBC. And not NBC. Well, I could, but CNN.
Mm-hmm.
If I want like more of like the hard, there's a package on President Trump and his impeachment going on. There are reporters from big NBC
Mm-hmm.
that make packages that the affiliates can use and pull and use that. So most often we're not gathering the information ourselves. When we're talking about like a national story, we're more like using what has been created by someone else and putting it in our broadcast.
Sure.
For an example, like Tracy Potts is a reporter for NBC News.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the Today Show, she'll be on there very often. But she also will make packages that are available for the affiliates to use. And that was one of the things that I had the option of doing, was like I had this website, and the website was a big pool of stories that we can use and put into our broadcast. We pulled the video, we pulled the scripts, and put it right in there. So when it's a national story, it's not directly us shooting the video and making the scripts and stuff.
Sure.
It's our news judgment that comes into play. It's like, should we take this? Yes. Is it relevant to the people here? Yes. And then when it is relevant, or like if it's a story going on here, that's our reporters, that's our photographers going out, shooting that, interviewing people for it, and that's all done normally. But when we're talking about what you're talking about, like more controversial situations, yeah,
Mhm.
that's more just like a judgment call. And sometimes it gets to a point where you can't not report on something, like when George Floyd grew into what it was.
Yeah, of course.
At the very beginning, it wasn't about Charlottesville, but it got to a point where it was
Hmm.
about everywhere. It was about every Black person in America.
Yeah.